Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment in a series of videos about the research process. I am Dr. Tanya Kafer, and I'll be walking you through this process. So last time we left off, we had designed the study and we were starting to work on the materials. If you remember, we were trying to compare three types of books: fiction books, information books, and a hybrid information narrative fiction book. I had my graduate assistant, who was a lovely and talented artist, come up with illustrations for me, and I had written the story previously, or I had a similar story previously, so I got her to draw up illustrations that could work if I was presenting a similar type story across multiple formats in different genres of book. And she did a wonderful job. It's going to need editing, obviously. The illustrations are the main thing. The book is the bit that is probably going to have to change. So you can see what the illustrations are. And I think they're lovely. I think she did a fantastic job. You can see the formatting on the words here is a little off, and that's because I just literally pulled this up from PowerPoint, and there's always a bit of a glitch when you start pulling things into new formats. Okay, but you can see, so this is the fiction book. It's called Snow Day, and I'll put an author and illustrator there so it's more book-like. And you can see it starts really much like a fiction book. Once upon a time, there go these fictional creatures are going to play in the snow. I think I'm going to have to add a couple of things here. I think there needs to be more content here. So the Moa's hat was where he sleeps. I think we're going to have to include there that wugs sleep in hives, for example. That's the piece of information they're trying to gain there. I know you guys don't actually care about the content of this, but to give you an idea of things I'm going to have to work on. So I'm going to have to work on all that. And you can see the fiction story. It's pretty straightforward. It's not really a great story. It doesn't have to be a great story. It just has to be something that is consistent. So this is the one that was the fiction book. Let me pull up the other book, the hybrid book. This is what the hybrid book looks like. Okay. And you can see it's basically identical. The illustrations are actually identical. The only thing that's changing is that there's more explicit things said in each one, so it's explicitly referencing, providing factual informational statements rather than embedding those within a fictional story. So it's basically one sentence is straight up informational. Cupido has a star under its arm because it's a wug, and that's followed immediately by something fictional. He looked near his star and found his hat. Or her. It's a her there. Okay, so let's look at the information book. Where's my information book? There it is. Okay. And here you can see that it is pretty different. So in this one, the illustrations are pretty different, and that's conventional. Hybrid storybooks in general, the illustrations look more like conventional storybooks, whereas information books, the illustrations are actually pretty different. They're organized quite differently. And you can see there isn't the framework of the story that the other two have. So this one is very much just fact, 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 fact. Okay? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to treat these as though they're a first draft, and I'm going to run some numbers, and I'll show you what those numbers are, and they're going to tell me what I need to change. So what I want to see is some consistency across these three, so I'm going to run some raw numbers and see how consistent they are to start with as a rough draft.
So I made myself a little chart to see if the three stories were similar on key points that I want them to be really similar on. So that was the number of words, how many times we used each of these individual words. And these don't have to be the same as each other. You can see the last four are all the same within the column, but what I want is for them to be similar across columns. They actually don't have to be similar within the column. And so what we see here is that they're not. After the first draft, I'm going to have to go back and do some work here. So these, in the total words in the story, don't have to be exactly the same. That would be sort of unnatural in terms of the story. And you don't want that either. Like, you don't want it to be really awkward and unnatural. So you want them to be similar, but they don't have to be exactly the same. That said, these ones are almost 100 words apart, and that's no good. So I'd like them all to be sort of between like 200 and 250. That seems sort of reasonable in terms of having a naturalistic story. And then these ones I do want to be exactly the same. And as you can see right now, the fiction book has about half the number of instances of saying the word wug as the information book does. I think that 12 is a pretty good round number, and I'll probably rework both of these stories so that we can have this have 5 more and this have 3 fewer. And then this one, you can see clearly for all these 4, these ones are said 2 times and these ones are said 3 times in each of these, so I think the easiest thing to do will be try to work one more of these in the fiction one. Okay, so that's my plan for now.
Okay, so I have made those changes as I said I would. We have gotten the word count up in the fiction one and down a little bit in the hybrid one. In the information book, we cut a couple of instances of WUG, and then we added some in the fiction book. So this is the information book now. As you can see, I've also rearranged it. Instead of having 2 a page, I'm having 1 a page, and that's because I've decided that probably the best way to present this is going to be on an iPad, so as like an electronic book. And in that case, it's easier to just have 1 page that you flip. Like that's more common in an ebook format, whereas having the 2 pages side by side, that's more common in like a handbook format. And honestly, I just don't want to go through the trouble of printing and binding these books. And so it's pretty straightforward. I think it looks really good. As you can see, I added illustrations. Anyway, it's not that exciting when all is said and done, but the books are done basically now that we've got that worked out. But you can see the consistency across them that I'm aiming for, and I think it's worked out pretty well. So I'm pretty happy with how these have turned out. What I'm going to do now is basically turn them into PDFs so they're ready to go to the REB when the REB needs to see them, and they're ready to go onto my iPad when it's time for that to happen. Okay, thanks. Bye.